Okay, good evening and welcome to the Prophetic Outlook. We're just about to roll our credits. So, guys, as you're coming on, I'll do the announcements now. Make sure that you like, share, and comment. We also know that about 48% do not subscribe to the channel. That's talking about those who watch it. So, take an opportunity right now to not just like, share, and comment, but subscribe. And if you can, in the intro here, as I play the intro, share it on your own social media. Let's go. Okay, and here we're ready to go. It is another crazy day. It is another crazy moment, and things are accelerating and escalating at a rapid rate. But before we get started, let's say hello to a few people. So we've got Rose on, we've got Kathy on, Roberta's here, Kelly's here, Coco Bear is here, Jared's here, Blessed, aka Dora, is here. Kiterlin is here. Deborah is here. Kathy B, Asset Ministries, Jason Garza. Um, Make sure you're saying hello, guys. We got Sir Pierce DeVille is here. Lynette is here. Christina is here. Joy in the morning. Stephanie. Guys, as you're coming on, make sure you're saying hello. Make sure you're saying where you're coming in from. Usual deal as well. You know the deal with questions. Question first, preferably in all caps, makes it easier for the moderators. Um, Hi, Joanne. Hi, Holly. JICA is here, and guys, keep saying where you're coming in from. We have loads to talk about. So you probably, like a lot of people, woke up this morning and saw that the ceasefire that was agreed to last night had ended. Now it appears, just so we're up to date and things, it appears from a recent statement, probably about an hour ago, that things seem to have settled down, that there's a re-establishment of this peace deal. Whether that is the case or not, I don't know, but that was certainly what was put out by Donald Trump. And I don't think he got out of bed on the right side this morning. Now, I've obviously edited this clip. If you haven't seen it, I've taken out the swear word that he used. Yes, the President of the United States dropped the F bomb. Um, but we want to discuss this a little bit. So let's just have a look.
Dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what they're doing. Do you understand that?
I edited that just before I came on tonight, so I cut out the F bomb. Um, it wasn't that impressive. I wasn't impressed by his rhetoric. I wasn't impressed by his take and his sort of attitude in regards to things. But this is an unusual ceasefire. In that, it's not a ceasefire that has come about by talks. It's not a ceasefire that's come about by mutual capitulation to agendas and things like that. It has came about because the President of the United States have told him this ceasefire is happening at this time. That's it. And since then, we know that he has already received a nomination for. Let me see if I've got this. I don't know if I do. Hold on. I thought I shared everything here. He's received a nomination anyway to for the Nobel Peace Prize, which is interesting. And this is the thing that has sort of taken me on this, right? I think the involvement of America in terms of the B two bombs being dropped, was needed. I think it was the right move to do. But my worry about it when I was watching it is that there was a lot of this is an optics moment as opposed to this is the right thing to do. This is an optics moment. Now, where we are sitting right now, already we have seen that, we've had the statements come out that, they will not be able to. Let me see if I've got this. These are some of the statements from Trump. Yeah, so he has said, this came out in the morning. It says Iran will never rebuild their nuclear facilities. Now, there's a problem with that in the rhetoric alone, right? If you had went to the deputy chief of the Security Council for Russia, I think 2 days ago or a day ago, or maybe a day ago, I'm kind of losing track of days, and he came out and he said Iran will rebuild. And he was quite open on it because he says not only will they rebuild, they're not rebuilding for the purpose of nuclear capability. He says now there's no point, I'm paraphrasing here, but there's no point in playing with words now. For weapons grade uranium, they will rebuild and there are nations ready to help them. So this adds an interesting mix. Because when we look at the prophecy of Jeremiah 49, for instance, it's not a conclusive prophecy in the sense that boom, it's fulfilled and that's it, right? Iran's never a problem. In fact, it is a setup prophecy. I have always held to the belief that Jeremiah 49 is a prelude to Ezekiel 38, right? And as it's a prelude to Ezekiel 38, it cannot mean the total eradication of the Iranian problem because Iran is featured in Ezekiel 38 as one of the parts of the alliance of Gog and Magog, right? So they're part of that. So in that term, in that sort of way of looking at things, actually Donald Trump's move here, no matter how I believe nonsensical it is, and it doesn't fit in with what would be considered safe geopolitical movements, it will align with prophecy in terms of Iran being left to rebuild. Now, this is went again. If you take his phraseology there and saying that, and talking about likes of Israel and Iran, they don't know what the bleep they're doing. The problem is I do think that Israel does know what it's doing, and Iran certainly knows what it's doing. I'm talking about the IRGC. They know what they're doing. They have an agenda. Their agenda is to wipe Israel off the map. They've been very clear about it from the very beginning for the last 46 years since Khomeini came into power in the 1979 revolution, that has been one of their main agendas. Israel know what they're doing. They're defending their people. They've taken battering after battering, war after war since the establishment of Israel in 1948. You had the War of Independence, you had Six-Day War, you had the Lebanon incursions, which went on for years, the Lebanese wars, you had the Yom Kippur War of 1973. You've had these continual wars for their very existence. Who doesn't know what they're doing seems to be, and this might hurt some Trumpites. I am not a Trumpite, nor am I anti-Trump. I am for Jesus Christ, right? I believe that if Trump does something well, he's going to get a thumbs up and a pat on the back from me. Not that he probably wants it. If Trump does something bad, I'm going to call him out on it. So on this, if this was a day ago he put up, it's not politically correct to use the term regime change. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Now, that is a day ago, and the rhetoric has changed. The rhetoric has changed drastically. Let me just see if I can find my graphic. Here it is. So he has now said today, I don't want to see a regime change in Iran because it creates chaos. Now, here's the thing. That is, if you're blaming Iran and Israel for not knowing what they're doing, the truth of it is they know what they're doing. This rivalry goes right the way back to Medina and Muhammad, right? And we'll talk about that. This goes right back to the around 628 AD. This goes right back to then. Now, who doesn't know what they're doing is someone who flip flops on their policies in this. Now, a lot of people will turn around in this, and if you're Trumpite, you will probably say that he's using the art of the deal and all of this. And I have seen him use that, and he's got a thumbs up in the way he's used that before. But in terms of this, saying they don't know what the bleep they're doing, to me, that shows a lack of control, a lack of posture, and unfortunately, an arrogance that is quite concerning to me. Now, again, I am not one way or the other, right? I think there's certain things I would go, Trump, that was fantastic, that was brilliant. There are other things in which I would go, Trump, that is wrong. The golden age nonsense, that is wrong, that is straight out of theosophy. Now, the reason I pick up on this is because there has been, I believe, for certainly the last couple of years, what I call division points among Christendom. Now, these are not always theological points. These are points of trying to sow division into the body of Christ. So, like I can tell you, I take hate mail. I take hate mail a lot because I'm pre-tribulation rapture believer. I take hate mail because I'm not a cessationist. I take hate mail because people just don't like the look of my face. So, regardless of that, hate can keep coming, but the truth of it is if you realize what Scripture says in Psalm 133, that in the unity of the brethren, the blessing is found. It is like the dew dripping down, it's like the dew on Mount Hermon dripping down, or the oil dripping down the beard of Aaron. It is a blessing. Then what the enemy knows is he wants to sow division. So what you've got is certainly Trump is a divisive character, and for some reason, incredibly divisive in the church. Like I said, I think he was the best person to be president out of the candidates there. I think that he's done some great things. I think he has also done some things that I completely abhor and completely disagree with. Like I said, the golden age, the AI infrastructure, all of that. Now, when it comes to Iran and Israel, what I'm saying is you could give him a degree of grace, saying there's ignorance over the situation, because honestly, there seems to be ignorance going all the way around the world, specifically with the heightened capability of social media of being the voice box for the ignorant, right? That people can just shout, "That's wrong." Why? Because I saw it on TV, right? The truth of it is, this is an age-old problem, and Iran is an age-old thorn in the side of God's agenda. And I'm not talking about the people, by the way, I'm talking about the principalities and powers that are over that place. And those principalities and powers are working through their mouthpiece, which is the Ayatollah and the IRGC. Now, Trump says that he doesn't want a regime change. However, we do know, let me see, I can't make this bigger. This is where I was bought a load of glasses, and yeah, let's just see if I can read this. You're missing my Robert De Niro face of trying to squint here. So this is from the Crown Prince, who's in exile right now. He says, "We are now moving into the final phase of our struggle. It will be hard, but the regime is weak. It is near collapse. Only we, the Iranian people, can end it." And I think he's right there, right? I think it has to be a homegrown revolt. And now there was, I think, about 6 p.m. British summertime, there was apparently gatherings happening in Iran to revolt against the regime. I don't know how it's went. To the military, as you're given orders to lash out at the people, stand down. This is your final chance. You are being watched. We will remember who stood with the people and who committed crimes against them. To the world, do not save this corrupt, crumbling terrorist regime. At this historic moment, stand with the Iranian people, shield them from the regime's desperate backlash. Do not prop up a regime that will soon, again, turn its guns, missiles, and terror towards you. Do not fear, be bold. Victory is in our hands. Now, this is a call to revolution by the exiled Crown Prince, and I think that he is right. Now, I think he is right for a number of different reasons, but what we're seeing is a different change of attitude from the world, because this is my very critical personal opinion on this, right? I think Trump looked at it that he got his optics. He got the dropping of the bombs, right? Some reports have come out already saying that it will take them 5 months to completely rebuild. 5 months. Now, Israel believe that they have knocked them back further into a couple of years, but they will rebuild. Now, what happens if they rebuild, like Russia had said, with the aid of other countries? Can anybody say Ezekiel 38? With the aid of other countries. So I think that like Trump was looking for optics to some degree, because you see this with when it came to the Strait of Hormuz. He says China can now continue to purchase oil from Iran. Hopefully, they will be purchasing plenty from the US. Also, it was my great honor to make this happen. I don't want to say egotistical, but there is a degree of ego on display here. Um, Let me see here again. Why is it all small? Heading to NATO, where at worst it will be a much calmer period than what I just went through with Israel and Iran. I look forward to seeing all my very good European friends and others. Hopefully, much will be accomplished. Now, these are the posts that he put out today. I've kind of lost some here. I don't know why, but it does seem like it's a case of optics. It does seem like it's a case of, right, we did this, and now I've told them that they must have a ceasefire. Now, again, I think that that shows a bit of ignorance when it comes to the culture and the history surrounding this conflict. Iran wants, certainly the IRGC, wants the eradication of the nation of Israel, right? The Shiite leadership of Iran do not want Israel to exist. They work through the proxies to a large degree, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others, and the Houthis and all. They work through them to continually be a thorn in the side of Israel. I believe Israel has got to the point of enough is enough. And I believe that what we will see is this interim peace right now. Now, this is kind of alarming when you start to think about the proximity of certain battles that are foretold in prophecy. Jeremiah 49, I believe, I believe it's fulfilled, because it is about the bow, it is about the weapons of Elam, it is about the ability to fire those weapons. But now, if, for instance, Iran's revolution and return to the Shah, return to a Shah type dynasty, if that is hindered because of American exclusionism, or America saying, right, no, we've done our part, you'll just do yours, and will not change the regime, instead we'll leave this regime in to rebuild, then you've got that period in which Ezekiel 38 is round the corner. You've got that period in which it says that already Russia said that they will rebuild, but with the help of other nations. Russia. If Russia step in there and help them rebuilding, what you're getting is a massive leap forward to the end time battle of Ezekiel 38 that we talk about all the time. And if that is the case, that gives you a proximity alert to where and when we are. And I think this comes from, like I said, this the biggest thing that I take away from this is the flip flop on regime change that Donald Trump has had in the last 24 hours, or less than 24 hours. But you have to understand the problem of Iran as well. Spiritually speaking, or Persia is mentioned in the Bible numerous times, right? We see it as part of that Nebuchadnezzar's statue. We see it in Daniel 10 in the Prince of Persia, or the Principality. But we also know that Persia is the birthplace of the ancient religion Zoroastrianism. Now, Zoroastrianism is where we get the character Mithra from, right? So I've done teachings on why Mithras, and the picture of Mithras is a prototype or foreshadow of the Antichrist. And we talked about this, right? So Mithras comes out of Zoroastrianism, comes out of the Persian belief system, right? And whenever Mithras came out of that, he found a home later on down the lineage of Nebuchadnezzar's statue into the empire of the Romans, into the Roman Empire. So created in Persian religion, created in Zoroastrianism, and then later on, under the Roman Empire, came to the fore. So by the time of Constantine in 312 AD, Constantine became converted to Christianity, but Mithraism was so big, specifically among his generals, that he had to adopt it in. This is where we get December 25th, the Sol Invictus Mithras date. This is where we get a lot of the cultures in terms of how Mithraism would have it would have been an underground sort of meeting. I've been to a Mithraic temple, and they would have met underground, out of the eyes of others, right? It was very much secret society based. Now, if you take that today, in today's model, is there something that has come out of the Iranian, let's say, ideology and found its home somewhere else? So if we take it under the template that how Mithraism worked, it was birthed in Zoroastrianism in Iran, in Persia, and it found its home in Rome. If you took that to modern day Rome would be the Roman Empire, sorry, would be the European Union. So that's like saying a belief system, some sort of ideology coming out of Iran and then finding a place in the European Union, the reconstituted Roman Empire. I don't know about you, but I can look at things. I can look at the pro-Palestinian movement, the movement of extremist, let's say, Islamic fundamentalism, and it's came out of Iran. It's came out of Iran, the terror sponsor of the world, and found its home in the European Union. That now we see attacks in Germany nearly every week. We see attacks in Britain. We saw an attack outside the Iranian embassy last week. We see it all the way around the place, that this is the growing norm. And I think that that's a cultural thing that is happening. I think that's something that's coming to the fore because it's found its home. And I don't know. Let me know what you think in this. I'm looking at your comments. Do you see what I'm saying here in the sense of an ideology leaving the Persian problem? Like talking about the area of Persia. And this is never to talk about the people. It's the fastest growing church in the world right now, the underground church of Iran. This is not talking about the people. This is talking about the principality above the nations. And in coming here in terms of that extremist ideology, I think it is. I think it's an issue. I think that extreme ideology is finding a place here. Um, like it's hard to imagine today a rhetoric or belief system coming from Iran and finding its home in Europe, but it is. And in terms of this, I want to look at a few things, if you don't mind, right? I want to look at the difference and why Iran sort of sets itself apart and Persia sets itself apart as an entity in the spiritual realm that kind of needs to be dealt with. Now, I'm saying this again with the caveat of not saying that, of saying this is not against the individuals or the people or the nation, even those who hate Christians and all of that. It's not against the individuals. It's talking about the spiritual ruler or principality above them. And when you look at this, you have to know the issues with Islam and what that talks about, right? And what we have as issues with Islam. And again, I know some great Muslims who are lovely, lovely people, but I am talking about the fundamental problems with that belief system. Now, that belief system, you have to remember, came from an individual called Muhammad who was, by all historical reports, illiterate. And so, whenever his father and mother died and he was brought up by his uncle, who happened to be I was going to use an analogy there. He happened to be like a salesman sort of individual. So he was traveling from town to town. Um, he was introduced to different ideologies. He was introduced to Judaism. He was introduced to Zoroastrianism. And we know he combined them all. But because he was illiterate, we can already see that in his illiteracy, there were problems with what he was hearing and what he was combining. For instance, we know that Muhammad believed the Trinity that we talk about in terms of Christianity, the Trinity, he believed was God, Jesus, and Mary. Now, that shows you that there's already problems with the, I guess, inerrancy and the infallibility that would come with the Quran when an individual is coming from such a basis that's not true. That's not what it says. And it even goes further. We know that some of his influences were not the Gospels, but the Apocrypha that were sitting around at those times. The Apocrypha that talked about, different Gnostic Gospels that came about hundreds of years after the fact that tried to make up stories about Jesus when he was 12 years old, making a bird out of clay and it flying away and all of this. And that is included within the Quran. Why? Because it came from a Gnostic source. We also know that he was prone in his travels to hearing things like Arianism, which kind of to some degree stood against. Arianism is kind of like very, very Gnostic in belief. It kind of de-deifies Jesus. It lessens who Jesus is. It makes him less than God. And then some of the teachings, like Gnosticism, started to say that it's more spiritual than it is actually in the body. And all of this got combined into Islam. And you think about it in modern terms. The book of Jude warns us about an end time apostasy that waters down the scripture. Well, one of the things that we see in history is that has happened at different points. It happened with Mormonism, it happened with the Jehovah's Witnesses, it happened with Islam, where it took scripture, watered it down, and created a different beast unto itself. This is what the enemy does. He comes in and he tries to water down scripture. We know this because if we take the likes of 2 Timothy 3, where it talks about Jannes and Jambres. And Jannes and Jambres, we know historically in the Bible were historically in extra biblical sources were referenced as the magicians in Pharaoh's court. But we know, according to extra biblical sources like the book of Jasher, that whenever Moses went on the Exodus and Israel left Egypt, that Jannes and Jambres decided that they were going to go with him. And this is kind of attested to in the writings of Paul, that we know that that they're referenced as those who creep in, making captive the gullible. Well, we see this, that one of the things that has happened in incursions in history, whether it was with Joseph Smith or whether it was Muhammad himself, that you see these incursions coming in and twisting scripture to make a different beast, anything to hide the truth of Jesus Christ. Now, then you'll get the skeptic and the critic come on board and start to say, well, no, 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 no. There's always been translation issues and blah, 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 blah. Well, actually, since 1947, we know that the translation issues that you're talking about are completely irrelevant, because they're talking about ands and thous and the dotting of the I and the crossing of the T, not as opposed to the actual scripture and what it is saying. So we know that the enemy works to try and twist and distort. And Islam, for me, and I'm sure that this is on YouTube, people will come along and have a go at me. I'm used to it. And I'm getting much, much better with the delete button. But Islam does the same. It takes Zoroastrianism, right? It takes Judaism and it takes Christianity and it takes other sources and it combines them into a religion, because you got in Mecca alone, they had a plethora of gods, and every town um, had an Allah, had a head god, right? And then of their head god, we know that when it came to um, Mecca, it was Hubal. And Hubal, we've already done this before, is associated with Baal of the Bible. This is the continuation of distortion and trying to sew in the opposite of what Scripture says. And it finds a root in this belief system. We know that in the early years of Muhammad, when he was just working as a religious leader, he'd only managed to convert around 70 individuals. It came through his political and military sort of avenues that he started to convert more. Now, one of the things that we know in terms of the relationship with the Jewish people is Medina. So, whenever he wasn't welcomed in Mecca, he went to Medina. And in Medina, he was invited in. He kind of made this agreement, this treaty. This is where the Islamic principle of the Hudna, making a treaty when you're weak and then breaking it when you're strong, comes from. So, he made a treaty with the Medina Jews. The Jews invited him in. There's three tribes of Jews. He was allowed to speak and talk about his own stuff and his own belief systems and get converts and all of this. Then, some years later, what happens is he gets a little bit stronger. I think he starts to get, you start to see him come out as a military leader. Like in 624 AD, there was the Bodran battle, or the Bodra battle. And in the Bodra battle, he showed his heart. Completely different than Jesus, by the way, because in the Bodra battle, whenever he was in conflict, he started to use the catapult. And he was warned by his soldiers, this is killing women and children. And his response was, well, they're among them. So this is the beast of what we're talking about. Now, on this basis, Muhammad lived the Sunnah, the perfect life. So he is let's say a goal to live the Sunnah by the Islamic belief system that if you want to live the perfect life, live like Muhammad. Now, when you look at that, you have to look at how Muhammad lived. Now, we'll come back to what happened with Medina, but if you look at how Muhammad lived, we know that. Let's do a comparison. Muhammad and Jesus. Jesus never killed anyone. Muhammad, we know personally, was involved in at least the deaths of about 3,000, right? Uh, Jesus abhorred slavery, never owned a slave, uh, didn't try and facilitate slavery. We know that a fifth of all slaves conquered and gathered in battle were given to Muhammad. Jesus never married. Muhammad had anywhere between 11 to 22 wives, with his youngest being 6 years old. Jesus, we know, never tortured anyone. Muhammad, we know in Kabir, there was a Jewish chieftain who held out against Muhammad. And Muhammad wanted to know where their wealth was, where their treasure was, and he wouldn't tell them. So he had this Jewish leader laid down and he had him held out, and they put a fire on his chest. They started a fire on his chest so the fire would actually burn into him and burn through him so that he would disclose where the riches were. We know that Jesus never lied. He is not a man that he should lie, right? So God is not a man that he should lie. Jesus identifies himself as the I am. He identifies himself as God. I know there is those in different faith systems will turn around and say, well, Jesus deceived in the sense that he said that he was God. And then some will say he never said he was God. Well, that's the old C.S. Lewis argument. You're either calling him, if you're going to call him a prophet, you can't call him a prophet and a madman. He is either who he said he was, or he's a madman. He can't be a prophet or a great teacher. He has to be one or the other. So Jesus never lied. We know Jesus never lied. Muhammad propagated the use of the taqiyya. Now, the taqiyya, let me see. Don't have the graphic. Sorry. The taqiyya is this. It is basically the ability to lie, as in to deceive. Now, this is where Persia comes in, right? So we know that the Islamic world is split between Sunni and Shia, mainly, right? The Sunni group makes up about 90%, we believe, of Islam. The Shiite group about 10%. The Shiite are the minority. However, the reason that they are split is basically, the main reason is lineage. Who was the successor of Muhammad? Who do they believe was the successor of Muhammad? So whenever you look at the Sunni believe that it was basically from the four generals that come back after, or the four chieftains that come after Muhammad, and they set up the new caliphate. So the four caliphs afterwards set up the lineage, right? The Shiite believed that it should have been the son-in-law, Ali, of Muhammad, and he should have been the continuation or the next part of the lineage, the continuation of the lineage. And they differ on this. So there was this concept of the takaya, right? The idea of deception, being able to deceive in order to get away with things. We saw it, and I'll come back to the Shiite, we saw it in Medina. So what happened is initially we talked about whenever you see Muhammad go to Medina and he makes this treaty with these Jewish tribes. Then eventually he comes back. This is the Hudna. He comes back and he breaks the treaty. He chases two tribes out. He takes one tribe of around 700 Jews, men, women, and children, and he beheads them. Right? What he has done is he's operated under deception. Now, Takia is also used, and it is kind of, I think it's Surah 328. I wonder if I've got that for you. Let's see if I've got that. Nope, don't have that either. I should have put this up. Sorry. The Surah 328 talks about deception and using deception to keep yourself okay, to keep yourself safe, right? Now it talks about in Surah 328 to not have friends that are unbelievers, right? Not have friends that are classed as infidels. But whenever you look at this, the taqiyya, um, after the Fitna Wars of 656 to 661 AD, you had Sunni come up as the main group, right? So they became the majority, Shiite became the minority. So the Shia had to adopt this taqiyya process of lying about who they were and what they believed for their safety. In other words, lying, deception became part of their belief system and ingrained in their culture. Now, if you then go to Iran and you look at the IRGC, the Shiite government, the minority leadership of the day, who operate as a death cult, they've operated under deception. Don't believe me? Well, what was coming out today was, do I have any of these pictures? Hold on. Nope. I failed you on the pictures and the slides. Apologies. But what was coming out today was mass celebrations, organized celebrations, claiming victory in the Iran-Israel war, right? The 12-day war. Iran, the IRGC have claimed victory. Now, not to mention that Al-Khamenei is still in hiding. No one's seen him, heard from him. He's stuck in a bunker. He has probably locked himself in and unable to find the key. Nobody knows, right? Not to mention that a lot of their leadership left. A lot Shia dynasty in exile. Others have just been eradicated by the nation of Israel, but they're claiming victory. What is that? That is the deception culture that is ingrained into the leadership. It is part of the Islamic taqiyya process, but it is part ingrained into the Iranian IRGC culture. Now, I have heard so many pundits on the TV start saying, "Well, no, you come against Iran." There is no one who is coming against Iran. This is the IRGC. If you go back pre 1979, you had a free society in Iran. Now that is a problem. That is a problem for the Middle East because Iran was also good friends at that point with Israel. That is a problem for the Middle East. It is a problem for the continuation of Shia agenda or even Sunni agenda. So what you saw was from the 1979 revolution, you saw taqiyya being adopted into the principle that everything got put on and deceived, and deception was the name of the game. Like Khomeini in 1979, they had a massive massacre. I think 4,000 of his own people he killed in one day, right? Who did he blame it on? The Zionists, the Jews. It's taqiyya as part of the deception. So if you get someone like Donald Trump saying, "Oh well, you know what, this side's accepted, this side's accepted," I think there's a real ignorance in regards to the culture, but an ignorance in regards to the ingraining of who you're actually dealing with. So whenever you look, like the Hudna comes into play in the three tribes of Medina as the first sense, and it then becomes, remember, the Sunnah is the perfect life of Muhammad. So they look at the perfect life of Muhammad and they say, we can adopt this, we can use this because Muhammad did this. Now, here's the thing: is like, we could look at statistics, we could look at open doors. The missionary sort of organization that says 9 out of 10 countries are the worst persecutors of Christianity are Islamic around the world. We could look at all that, or we could turn around and say, hold on a minute. What you've got with the Iranian issue is spiritual. It is based in deception. It is based in control. It is based in making treaties when you're weak and breaking treaties when you're strong. It is the lie and lie again mentality. Because Surah 328 says, let believers not take friends and allies, infidels instead of believers, were or whoever does this shall have no relationship left with Allah. So the belief system that you're dealing with says that if they're friends and they're shaking your hand and smiling and say, yes, we'll accept peace and all of this, if they're doing that in sincerity, according to Surah 328, they will be cut off from Allah Himself. So therefore, that you can either take that they are doing it in sincerity and they do not believe what their belief system says, or they're doing it with tikya. They're doing it with this idea of deceiving for the purpose of gaining strength, or the hudna, making a treaty until they have the months to build up their weapon system again. It's, when you start to see this, I can't see anything, and I know this isolates people. I can't see anything redeemable when I talk about the Islamic religion, and that does not mean the Islamic people. Um, I have met and I know some great individuals who are Muslim, and they're lovely, and I have no issue with an individual. I'm talking about an ideology, and this has become unpopular to say within the church, because if the church says this, automatically you're classed as A, B, and C. People like to throw around words and call you this. No, the very fact that I am Christian tells me that I am adverse and at odds with other ideologies. The very fact that a Muslim is a Muslim means that they're at odds with other ideologies. Now, how I reach the Muslim is I can show them love, but I don't have to accept their ideology. There are so many holes because I look at the illiterate individual who was behind the uh, belief system, and he saw that that belief system was not gaining traction under just a religious leadership, so he became a political and military leader as well. And he stands completely in contrast to the Son of God. He stands completely in contrast to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And so it's just, it kind of dumbfounds me that there's this sort of ingrained thing within society right now that you can't say what something is for fear of causing offense, for fear of causing irritation or whatever. But the very fact that I can be slammed online, sent hateful messages, and all of that, that's okay because I'm a Christian. But if I turn around and say, I don't believe in your system, I think your system is actually demonically focused and as a demonic agenda, it's an agenda that works with the doctrine of demons, according to my belief system, then automatically you become public enemy number one. And this is, look, without going down too many rabbit holes, I want to say this, right? I believe that if this continues as it is, in the sense that Donald Trump doesn't do another flip flop, and if he says there's going to be no regime change in Iran, then what you're going to see is the Iranian system rebuilt. And what you're going to see is it rebuilt, like Russia said, with the help of other countries. Then that is the leap forward to Ezekiel 38, in my opinion. But also, one of the most scary things is the capitulation of the West to not call things as they are. I have had individuals who have loud voices but no understanding or no historical basis for what they're believing. They're believing everything that their news pundit is saying rather than reading a history book, rather than actually looking at a source. And it's ridiculous that that Christianity can be continually abused in a Christian nation. But if I turn around and I say, look, that belief system is based on illiteracy, misunderstanding, apostate teachings found in each other source, and it was only to any degree successful when it became a political and military force, and it relies on deception and false treaties in terms of its success, then I'm evil, I'm a bad guy. Truth it is, I hate no man, no individual. I have nothing but love for them. But love is not as the world says. Love is not the thing of going, right, will you believe that? You keep going to hell in a handbasket and I love you so much to let you. No, real love is risking being hated, risking being uh, detested, silenced. That's real love. I love you enough to tell you the truth. And the truth is that system is demonic. So let's take questions if you're ready. I know I'll get hate on this because I've got hate on the last lot of videos I've done. Um, Not from you guys, but I tend to get it after the fact. So I get a lot of people who come on, watch it, or don't watch it, and then they turn around and they come off with a load of nonsense. And sometimes this sounds really bad, right? I am a firm believer that you can't argue with stupid. Now, I'm not saying people are stupid. I'm just saying that if people are coming from a place of ignorance and they're just out there to throw stones, that's I'm not going to waste my time with you, right? So that's my belief anyway. So let's uh, let's go to some questions. If you've got some questions, if I can find Discord here, um, let me know what your. Where are we? Nope, wrong thing. Hold on. Okay, so we'll get to some of these questions. I can see them all coming in now, but let me know, where are you on this? I personally think, like I don't, like I said, I don't have a problem with any individual, but I purposely think that one of the things that we're seeing at play right now is elite agenda to divide groupings. It's prophesied about in Matthew 24 in terms of ethnos will hate ethnos or fight with ethnos, right? Um, so let me see. Joy in the Morning says, question: how and when does it end in Gaza? It ends in Gaza with the fulfillment of Zechariah 12. Now, that is because that's what we're seeing right now. Zechariah 12 will see those nations kind of. So Zechariah 12 verse 2 talks about the surrounding nations. So that includes, excuse me, that includes Hamas, Palestine. That includes Lebanon, and those places will be dealt with in the terms of probably to a large degree how they've been dealt with, but it will be a case of I think, let me put it this way, I think part of it already has been done. So if you look at the Iranian regime were primarily the funders, the financiers, and the equippers of Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas, the militia groups, the discord on the Judea and Samaria and stuff. They were responsible for all this, and They were using the money that they were given from the American administration, such as under Obama, um, under Biden, who basically 10 times what Obama gave, and they were using that to fund the proxies as well as their nuclear program. Now, what they're going to have now, and where I think there is going to be this peace and portion of rest that doesn't last, because if they allow the Iranian regime to be rebuilt, which seems to be the rhetoric coming out, then it can't last, because we know Ezekiel 38 is going to come. And they have already been clear that their agenda is their agenda, that they I've seen reports from the the head of the nuclear research and all of that in Iran, saying it is so ingrained within their infrastructure, they will be back within 5 months. Now, whether they're back within 5 months or whether, like Israel, believe they're back in a couple of years, you could have that portion of peace. Because if you don't get Iran financing and sending weapons to Hezbollah, to Hamas, to the Houthis, and all of that, then what you'll have is they will quieten down, or at least largely be dealt with already by the IDF. And in that, now I know it's not finished, but in that way, I think that that could be finished quite quickly because of the Iranian conflict. And you could see that you could see that Ezekiel 38 verse 11 moment where there's living in unwalled villages. And this is the setup. This is the setup in terms of Ezekiel 38, because what this does is this leaves the avenue open for that facilitator of Iran's rebirth, possibly Russia, probably most likely Russia, coming in. And then what you see is, right here, let's go and attack Israel. And I think that it's all being set up. So how it's dealt with, I think, is largely off the back of this 12-day war, because Iran is now going to be focused on its rebuild, that it cannot afford to spread its forces primarily to its, or spread its money to the proxies. Now, you could say that Iran will look to continually be a thorn in the side of Israel through the proxies, but that'll be dealt with harshly. I believe that will be the end of any ceasefire if they continue to do that. And if that's the case, Iran might take the process of going, right, we've tried it a couple of times, we've attacked Israel a couple of times through Hezbollah, through Hamas. We've got to take a back seat because we need to rebuild this. We need to find out where Khamenei's hiding. We can't still find him. He's probably stuck in the toilet somewhere and he's still trying to find door handles. So we've got to go and find him, right? So I think they will be, to a large degree, distracted. Um, Yeah, so Jason's asked to have an Ezekiel 38-39 coalition. It seems to me there won't be a change in Iran's leadership. My thoughts. Yeah, my thoughts are there won't be, right? I would love to see a change in the leadership. I think Iran deserves a change in leadership. I think the Iranian people deserve a change in leadership. And that would facilitate the church. Um, but I think that even if there is a revolution and there is skirmishes and stuff like that, I think it will undoubtedly end with the IRGC still in control. And I think that will be, could be from outside influence, it could be from Russia or whatever, but they will still be in control. And if they're still in control, that's going to pave the way to Ezekiel 38. Joanna said, what's your thoughts on sleeper cells? Are we in danger of the people in our hotels? Do you think this is the time they will start doing what they came here for, or am I overthinking? I have to be very careful, right? I have to be very careful, Joanne, just because I'm on this platform and I can be shut off very, very quickly for things. So my thought is that let's look at what the government said. The governments in America have said that there are sleeper cells. We know that there are sleeper cells in the UK. How do we know that is if you go back and you look at any sort of attack, they have, even through the age of ISIS and the heyday of ISIS about 10 years ago, any sort of attack kind of came from people on MI5's radar or around that, but they were other inbuilt British people who have been here for a lifetime who were somehow just sort of brought to the scene, and they ended up getting involved in whether it's 7/7 or something like that. They got involved in a terror activity. Now the thing is Iran is incredibly astute at this, incredibly astute. And if you even go back to the beginning of the Hamas conflict, right? So you go off the back of October 7th, 2023, Iran pushed money in to I think I can't remember the exact name. It's something like the London Islamic Institute or something like that. They pushed money, money, money into there for the very purpose of going out and spreading, I would say, disinformation to provoke hatred towards Israel. And they done. If you want to ask, did they do a good job? They did a job and a half, right? Because you look at what came off the back of that, and I think they were very much aided by the media. But they're very good at infiltrating countries. I done a teaching ages ago called the tentacles or something of Iran, because that's how they operate. And in terms of those who have came into the country and those who have came in illegally, we know it is known because it has already been disclosed in certain countries that a lot of those who have come in have came in and are already radicalized. But then, this is the thing. You don't want to say anything that pushes out hatred, because there's a lot of those who have come in and all they're doing is probably seeking a better life. Um, my thing is I will say, who was it? Was it Pete that used to say to me, keep your head in the swivel? Um, it's not to fear it, but I do think that the increase of that activity, the increase of terror is coming, and it is prophesied about. Right, there will be an increase of terror, um, and it doesn't strike me as anything like that. I know sleeper cells and all of that have been in the news. It doesn't strike me as anything new. It's something that is it's kind of quite not I'll not say obvious, but it's been how Iran has always operated, and it's been how because what they're very good at is acting as a destabilizer in whatever region they want to get their tentacles in. So they're a destabilizer in the Middle East, but they've also destabilized other countries through activities such as that, and that includes, and this is where it is. So Iran, a Shiite government, has funded Sunni terrorists. So even though they are split with themselves, they figure, look at, you know, we'll fund the ones that don't like us just for the purpose of this. So we know they funded ISIS despite the fact that there's ideological differences. So yeah, uh, without being too alarmist, I do believe that if you're seeing, and we have seen specifically in America, we've seen reports coming out from those in the security industry saying that that's a fear. I would say that it's not a fear. It's kind of an observation, an astute observation. Um, Sorry, I couldn't answer that better. I have to be very careful about how I answer it without getting shut down. Um, okay, so hold on. I'm trying to. I don't know if I've got glasses in my office. I know that guys give me, like, they give me 10 pairs of glasses for my birthday there, and I just keep leaving them around. It's not the glasses that are the issue, it's me, right? Let me see. The 26th is the Muharram at sundown, Islam's New Year. Can you explain that name? What month for them? I don't really go into. I'll do that in terms of Hebrew. I'll do that in terms of the Jewish uh, months and the Jewish seasons. But I'll not. I don't really go into that with Islam. I think it's important to know what others study. So I have read the Quran. Um, but again, I wouldn't turn around and say, I'm an expert when it comes to Islam. I do know my history. I do know. I do curse or whatever. I do have a memory that remembers an awful lot of things. So, are blessed. But I don't really go into too deep into their belief system that way. Steve has asked, Gary, I believe that there are higher powers controlling Trump and the Prime Minister. Who do you think they are? Is it the Illuminati? Um, I'm not sure they're right. So, if you're talking about the Prime Minister in terms of the British Prime Minister, um, yeah, I don't doubt that. He is, in my opinion, very, very weak willed, very, again, flip floppy. Um, but at the same time, where he sort of pledges his allegiance before his election, he said that his allegiance was with Davos and not with Westminster. Now, that to me tells it all. Now, in terms of the Illuminati, in terms of secret societies, the Illuminati's not high up per se, right? So I know most people hear Illuminati and they think, "Oh, that's a made-up thing." It's not, right? It in Spain it would have been the Alumbrados, right? So if you take the Jesuit movement under Ignatius of Loyola. I was talking about this with someone. Ignatius of Loyola, who founded the Jesuits, was put on trial for being a sympathizer to the Alumbrados, which is also it's the name for Illuminati. But in terms of secret societies, you would have had as the hierarchy, you would have the Freemasons, the Alumbrados, then you would have the Committee of 300. This is a tiered system of secret societies, right? You'd have now there's a lot of things that filter in there. This is kind of basic, right? The Committee of 300. You would have the Committee of the 13 families, and then you would have the 13 families. Now there are more than 13 families. These are families that have bloodlines that are connected to the Luciferian belief and the esoteric belief of royal blood lineage. So this is that their bloodline traces back, usually and can be traced back to Watcher stroke Nephilim lineage, right? Does this make sense? So, for instance, right, King Charles, I've told you this before, King Charles associates says that he traced his bloodline back to Vlad the Impaler. Now, we do know that Vlad the Impaler's bloodline can go back to a Herculean tribe, right? So, a tribe of Hercules back in the Greek culture. So, it can be traced back to there. So, Hercules would have been a Grecian form of a Nephilim. So, his blood lineage would come from a Watcher. So, the idea and the mentality around the royals and secret societies and families is that the royals believe that their blood lineage traces back to the fallen angels, and this is then sort of filters down into secret societies and stuff like that. In terms of someone controlling Trump, I think that's a harder deal, right? I think, like I said, sometimes Trump does something great, sometimes Trump does something I really disagree with, and I could uh, it doesn't impress me at all that way. And his rhetoric today was just, I'll be honest, I was disgusted with. I was disgusted with him using profanity on live TV. I was disgusted with his attitude towards Israel. That's me, right? But I think that is who he is. I think that he is a man built on ego, pride, and winning. And so he had given out a thing of a statement saying, "Oh, we've got a peace deal," and then for it to be broken so quickly, he's sort of his there was yolk on his face, there was egg on his face, so there was a lashing out because his ego had been dented. Now, I do believe God can use individuals who are still operating off ego, but I also believe the devil has a hold on those individuals who operate off pride, right? Because that's the devil's go-to. Um, so I think that like I said, I put no faith in man. I think that his rhetoric today was disgusting and worrying. Um, But again, it will align, even though it's the wrong take on things for the betterment of humanity, it will align with prophecy. Um, let me see. Beth Ann has said, is it possible the ceasefire could be strengthened down the road as per Daniel 9? Your beloved. Thank you. So I don't think this is the ceasefire, or say this is the agreement of Daniel 9:27. I would see it more as a setup towards Ezekiel 38. And then I think in Ezekiel 38, what you'll get off the back of that is is the Daniel 9:27 covenant, at least to some degree. You might get the now. So a lot of people will put out and say, "Well, look, there's this happening, and there's this happening, and there's this happening." That could be the start of the Daniel 9 treaty, and it could be because really the Hebrew word used in Daniel 9:27 is that he comes and he affirms a treaty. So we could already see the the principles in place for that agreement, and this could be part of it. But I think really what we'll see is that treaty come to the fore, at least in its biblical form from Ezekiel 38. Um, yeah, so that's kind. I get what you're saying, but I think sometimes we're in danger of just trying to say, well, there's a treaty there. There's put it this way: this treaty cannot hold. It can hold for a period, but it cannot hold. And I know that Daniel 9:27 treaty will be broken 3.5 years in, but I believe Ezekiel 38 is pre-tribulation. So if Ezekiel 38 is pre-tribulation, it will be broken before that, if you get me. Um, Pure Fire of God, Mom and Son in Christ. Question: who thinks lots of Iranian nukes or nuke making kit have been flown out for safekeeping in Russia, China, or both? If at all, that is. Um, well, certainly the rhetoric came out today. I don't know if I've got it. I like I said, I forgot to put up most of my slides. Um, the the head of the nuclear movement, the nuclear organization within the infrastructure of Iran, came out today and where's my comments? Hold on, let me go back to comments and said that they well basically alluded that they had moved, um, and that they were safe, and that their whole there will be a continuation of things. There will be a continuation of the nuclearization. It's not stopped. Let me just see if I can find it really quickly. No, that's what it was on. Hold on. This is where you realize how technically challenged I am. Uh, right, so much here. Hold on. Yeah, it's so far back I can't find it. So basically, he said that they moved the stuff right. He wasn't so graphic, but he just says like every part of they were astute enough to have moved the uranium, the enriched uranium for the purpose that they had, and they're ready to restart. So that was already said. So I think that it could have been moved. Could it have been moved out of country? I think you probably would have had a pickup of that from the Israelis. They would have been able to see that cross border because it's not that easy to take enriched uranium across borders without setting off alarms and being picked up on in observation. So I think that it will be somewhere. So the IAEA had said that they had enough to do at least 10 bombs. I think it'll be somewhere in Iran right now. That's my belief. And they would have taken it out of the key. They would have known that Fordo was going to be hitting. They would have known that these major sites would have been targeted. So it makes sense that that would have been the case. Let me see. Where are we? Why do so many focus on 666 rather than 660 and 6? We are told to calculate the number. It's true. Yeah, no, it's true. I think that people, well, the reason people focus on it, I think, is because it also points to certainly within the Hebrew context, it points to man. So 666 being Vav, Vav, Vav points to man multiplied in terms of man being at the pinnacle of its rebellion against God. Um, when we see it in terms of 660 and 6 and the calculation of it, there is something of a mystery about that. So the thing that I think people grasp onto is the bit that they can discern. And the bit that they can discern is that the Antichrist who comes through, or the beast who comes through, who has this calculation behind his identity, will also represent man in full rebellion against God, which is 6 in triplicate. So I think that's what people are doing. They're focusing on what they can decipher as opposed to the mystery that hasn't yet been revealed. But you're quite right. The it's 660 and 6. Um, question: Do you think? What do you think of Canada getting so close to the EU? I think. Thank you, Dora. I think that it's not. It's not unexpected. So Mark Carney, we know that he used to be the head of the Bank of England. So he has kind of like that Western sort of, you know, let's say Anglophile sort of mentality as well. And if you take that under its current form, he also wants to distance himself from America. Now, this probably to some extent came off the rhetoric. Some would argue came off the rhetoric of Trump when he got elected, of saying that Canada would be the 51st state. I personally think it's Mark Carney's sort of approach. He is very much like Trudeau. He's very much like Trudeau point two, right? He or 2.0. He kind of hyperbolizes an awful lot of things that Trump says. So Trump works off hyperbole, but then Mark Carney will turn around and just say, "Let's make it bigger because he said this. It's so awful, and because it's so awful, let's find um, another ally of sorts." And he has connections across Europe through his dealings with the Bank of England. And this is, to me, something not unexpected because I think, again, it's something biblical. One of the things that has happened, and one of the things that what we're seeing right now prophetically, I believe, are catalyst points, points of acceleration, right? Points in which the catalyst hits or like even if you think of a catalytic converter, something hits it and speeds it up, right? Trump is one. When Trump got into office and when Trump brought in the tariffs caused countries to form other alliances. We saw Keir Starmer go back into Europe and basically undemocratically undo Brexit and take us into a European connection that is even worse off than we were before. We've also saw the growth of the EDU, the European Defence Union, and the call under that to have a continual standing army, but not just a standing army, and nuclearization of Europe as an entity, not individual nuclear powers within Europe, but a Europe collective nuclearization. So Europe is growing in that sense as a beast unto itself. Now, this falls into the Daniel 2 vision of or dream of Nebuchadnezzar in terms of the beast system. Clay and iron combined, partially strong, partially weak. Europe will be strong because the member states, there's going to be some of the member states will be strong. They will be strong as a collective. But because if you ever watch a European parliamentary debate or anything like that, they can't agree on much, they will be weak as well. That will allow for the little horn to come through and subdue them. Now, I think that when you see Canada and other countries trying to align themselves with Europe, oh, I just dropped my phone. I think that is again a move towards this beast system. And as you see a move towards this beast system with all of this, I think that what you're, again, it's a proximity thing. It's how close we actually are. And it doesn't surprise me, like Mark Carney doesn't surprise me at all. But and also with this, it's not just a continuation of his previous post and trying to, it is the growth of this reconstituted Roman Empire that is happening. Like, you look at the laws coming in here, they are so barbarian. In the last week, we have had in the UK abortion up to birth, right? Now, I've had arguments online with this with people, but again, I say you can't argue with stupid. So when they'll say, "Oh, it doesn't exactly mean that." No, what it says is that a woman won't be prosecuted for that. Now, that is even scarier, right? Because what that is saying, that it says that yes, a doctor could be prosecuted, but a woman won't be prosecuted. So what will a woman do? A woman will try and take care of this on her own, whether this is at full term, taking pills to abort the baby. Now, anybody who's lost a child in terms of either stillborn or miscarriage, like we've had miscarriages, it's dangerous after the point, right? So once it happens, you have to have a procedure because it's dangerous. But then there could be, the way this rhetoric is working, not just is it evil, it is actually just ill thought out. And not just is it ill thought out, it shows you the debased mindset that is set into this area of the world. Not just in the same week we had that, then we also had assisted dying bill passed. So I said this on Sunday. You know, if you go back to 2020 and they were saying stay at home and save a granny, now they're telling you to kill a granny and save a bed for the NHS. It is absolutely dumbfoundingly kind of crazy. But these are the times that are prophesied about. And I think that we're going down this route faster and faster. And I think that it's when you start to see countries align like this, they're not just aligning in terms of policy, but Britain kind of going back into Europe, Britain going back in with these barbarian policies. But these barbarian policies are also in operation where? In Canada. So, oh, hey, Bubba. Bubba's on tomorrow night with me. We'll be discussing all things geopolitical, all things that are happening across the world, specifically in the Middle East. But get ready for that. That's tomorrow evening. Gary, what are your thoughts on the Elam prophecy taking a back seat to other prophecies coming up before its fulfillment, like Damascus? Well, I think that, let me put it this way. I think that when you look at prophetic fulfillment, we tend to think of prophetic fulfillment like a straight line. We tend to think of it like this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. But that is not how it happens biblically. What happens is this part of the prophecy will be fulfilled over here, and then this will be fulfilled over here, and this will be fulfilled. But they're all kind of happening at the same time. They're not tend to happen linear in a linear motion. There tends to be little things happening. So I personally believe that what we've seen is Jeremiah 49. Now, it may say, people may be going, well, there's parts of this and there's, they're still operating and all of that. But I think we'll not see, just like you look through, like you'll know, Bubba, that whenever you look through Zechariah 12, when you go to verse 1 to 9, you've got a certain fulfillment of the prophecy. But when you hit verse 10, there's a major jump forward. It's the millennial kingdom. Well, the same, I think, applies here, that you're seeing fulfillment, but you're not seeing the end of Jeremiah 49. You're not seeing Jeremiah 49 verse 39, in which God establishes his throne in Elam. You're not seeing a continual dispersal of people, but that doesn't mean that that prophecy hasn't been fulfilled. It means when you look at this, there's a prophecy fulfillment, but again, we tend to read it all together as one, as opposed to how it would have been read by the rabbis. It would have been read, and then they would have deciphered which part this was and which part this was. You take it, for instance, in Isaiah 53, or any sort of messianic prophecy. If you read a messianic prophecy like Isaiah 53, it goes from first coming, next verse, second coming. And so what I'm saying is, I believe Jeremiah 49 has been fulfilled, not in its totality in terms of the throne being sat there, but probably for as much as we will see. And I think that the destruction of Damascus will be a play on this. So this is the way I'm looking at things right now. And obviously the situation's fluid, war is fluid, and all of that. But I see that the first portion of Jeremiah 49, the portion that we're going to ever see, has been fulfilled, right? The destruction of the bow, to get a period of Ezekiel 38 to come in, right? I believe Isaiah 17 then, the destruction of Damascus, may be pushed as a prelude to Ezekiel 38. So we have Jeremiah 49, destruction of the bow, but not completely to the point of verse 39. But I don't believe we'll see that. That could be something fulfilled much later, or further on. But Jeremiah 49, the destruction of the bow, has allowed for the Zechariah 12 verse 2 or Ezekiel 38 verse 11. It will be the unwalled villages. However, if Iran is being aided by Russia to rebuild, right, or another country like Russia, like the deputy chief of the Security Council said, to rebuild their nuclear program, then you could see that being a point of friction, things being transported through Damascus, and Israel take now, let's say an attack upon Damascus, destroy Damascus, and that could be a point that provokes. There's a few other geopolitical things that would have to happen there, but that could be a point that provokes certainly a move towards Ezekiel 38. But I've always looked at it. I think that in the West we kind of look like that's done, that's done, that's done. But the way prophecy is read, I think you start to see fulfillment. Oh, they didn't fulfill the next verse. That's because that next verse comes much later. Or fulfillment, and this is fulfilled at the same time, and this is convergent at the same time. And I think that's the way it works, because I think it's a Western mentality to look at things linear, when a prophecy or a moedim or a prophetic moment is often described as a coil. That's what I think anyway. Um, you can let me know if you disagree tomorrow night, Bubba. I see. God bless us, everyone. Frequent guest on Paul Begley's Prophecy Hour, aka the Apocalypse Now program, says our figureheads are just that. There's actually a committee. My wife's turned the heating on again. Hold on. Right, that's not working. Kelly, you need to turn the heating off. The things off the radiator. You need to turn the heating off. I am baking in here. There's actually a committee who pretty much probably tells them what to do. All right, okay. I think this is talking about like secret societies again. Yeah, I would suggest that there are definitely people behind the scenes, and usually, so if you take, let's take the Third Reich. The Third Reich was in no doubt set up as a Luciferian agenda to bring about world domination. Um, Heinrich Himmler's approach, Adolf Hitler's approach, they were both coming off a geopolitical combined with a religious setting, but their timing was wrong because Israel was not re-established. Now, with that, what came off the back of that is the Third Reich never really ended. It had a continuationism, or continuation system put in. Before the destruction of the Nazi regime, Heinrich Himmler put in place the Friends of the Fuhrer, and he also put in place different things to continue the Nazi regime. You also had, forgot it, the Norman Circle. Sorry, the Norman Circle. The Norman Circle was a continuation from Werner Norman, who was part of the elite Nazi regime. He was in the bunker with um, Goebbels, and he was in the bunker with Goebbels, and he saw Goebbels kill himself and kill his family. And Naumann then later on continued to pull the scenes, continued to pull strings behind the scenes, and he continued, and he ended up in dying of old age. He became an industrialist. He tried to go back into politics, and when he tried to go back into politics, he was arrested because no Nazi could go for a political position again. However, he was released without charge. Why? Because the judges in Berlin at that time, 70% of the judges in place were ex Nazi officials. In other words, it was those behind the scenes still had the power. Now, if you take the Third Reich, like I said, and you continue on from that, what you see is Joseph Goebbels, or so not Joseph Goebbels, Heinrich Himmler continued through the Friends of the Fuhrer. And the Friends of the Fuhrer then he developed they developed the Bank of International Settlements. So the head of the Bank of International Settlements happened to be the head of the Bank of England and the head of and a key Nazi figure. And then there was a couple of American industrialists who were brought in, and they headed out the Bank of International Settlements. Now, the Bank of International Settlements were responsible for a lot of the money movement across the world in the last sort of 70 years, right? So the Bank of International Settlements and the Friends of the Fuhrer, you start to look into those companies, you see who's involved. Siemens, uh, tons, I'm forgetting the names, but tons of these organizations that were involved with the Friends of the Fuhrer then later joined the World Economic Forum, and they're still operating behind the scenes. And the IMF and the Bank of International Settlements still carrying on the demonic Nazi agenda that was established in the Third Reich to this day. And as they're still continuing it on to this day, they're still trying to enact policy. You heard a few years ago Klaus Schwab come out and say that they'd infiltrated every Western government and every Western cabinet, right? That's child's play. In truth, the money is pulling the strings. So whenever you're looking at the Bank of International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, and things like that, they are pulling the scenes behind this. The bankers are the ones that have the money. The bankers are the ones that are in control. If you go to secret societies, then you can break that down into the 13 families, and the 13 families are supposed to be the 13 wealthiest families in Europe. Now, there are 13 families as well associated maybe in different parts of the world, America and all of that. But the 13 family system is a demonic system that is set in play to pull the strings, because he who has the money has the control. So when you're talking about what these figureheads are talking about, they tend to realize that they have financial strings behind the scenes. Now, this is where Trump differed in a large portion of the population's eyes, because he had his own wealth. And as he had his own wealth and it was extensive, was he going to be reliant on everybody else to pull the strings? Well, pre-Trump getting into power this time, I did say that he may come into power on good terms and with a good agenda, but I think that there will be some sort of corruption happening, because it will be a financial pressure. And I think that's because you can take that off the backings of what you've seen across Western governments. I'm sorry I'm boring you, but Liz Truss, when she was 42 days as Prime Minister, um, the week of her having to hand in her resignation, there was a stock market crash. There was all this crash, right? Now, the crash, she proclaims in her book, came off the back of her international policies, her foreign policy, that it didn't align with the Bank of England, the central bank. It didn't align with their policies. So what happened is the Bank of England started to sell off government bonds. When they sold off government bonds, it caused a stock market fluctuation. Then all fingers were pointed at Liz Truss and says, this is based on your policies. You must quit now. In other words, it's the money lenders, or those with power, those with strength, and those with the deep pockets that can control those who are put into political office. Now, I wouldn't say it's everyone, but I would say that there's a lot of individuals who are subservient to those in a better financial, let's say that the elite rich of the rich. Um, have I answered everything? Let me just double check. There's nothing else there. I think that's it. Um, no bow, not broken. It was went on a trip to China, or it is in the city under the baby's beds. Remember whom we are dealing with. Bubba News. I got out of the hospital systems trying to shut down. Um, in terms of the bow is not the nuclear weapons. Just by and by, that's not the nuclear weapons. The nuclear weapons on that analogy, um, the word bow in Hebrew is cassette, Qeset in English, right? Or the Kof, the Aleph, the Shin, and the Tav, right? So you would, when you look at that, that word describes the firing mechanism. It actually is a descriptive word of pulling back the string and letting go. So it talks about being pulled to tension and then coming firm, right? So that's what cassette means. So when the bow of Elam is broken, it is talking about the firing mechanisms. It's talking about the missile launchers. It's talking about not specifically the arrow, which may be a nuclear warhead. It is talking about the systems that can facilitate the firing of that. So I believe that the nuclear materials being used for enrichment to to warhead standards have been hidden or removed. Yeah, I do, but I don't. I do think that Israel, specifically Israel, not the US on this occasion, Israel, have been really, really good at breaking the bow. They have at least put a hindrance for, it could be 5 months to 2 years, in Iran's capability of firing nuclear warheads. Um, they've done that. Whether it's a case of that's just the period of peace to allow the rebuild to get to Ezekiel 38, that's what I would sort of lean to. But I don't know if it's, yeah, it's exactly that. Um, so I think, let me see. I think I think that I've answered everything. Hopefully, I have. My wife's done it again, just so you know. And now I've tried to turn the knob to turn the radiator off, but the knob just came off. So she's trying to kill me. I think you have to pray for me. I think she is literally, she must have taken out new life insurance or something, and she's trying to turn this office into a sauna so that I just collapse. Um, Israel says that only 65% of Iran's ballistic missile launchers destroyed. Go get them, Israel. I actually think there's work to be done on this. I do. I think there's work to be done. And I don't think, look, so what we've got right now is a tentative ceasefire. I don't think the ceasefire complete point. So kind of today, Donald Trump's outburst was a bit of an enforcement, but I think it's going to, I don't find this. We're going to Italy at the end of the week, and she's just messaged me. I'm acclimatizing you to Italy by turning the radio on. You're killing me here. Um, I think that like 65% is a massive job that they've done. I think they need it longer. I think they've been stopped prematurely, but I do think that this is. I cannot disassociate this from Jeremiah 49 for me. I think this is Jeremiah 49, but like I said, with a lot of prophecies, the partial then complete. So like you'll see a good part of the fulfillment, then you'll see it completely fulfilled. Um, and then we don't know how that could be because, to be perfectly honest, 65% done. What happens if what we've been seeing already happens bigger in terms of an earthquake. What happens if we see an earthquake happen and we see maybe the continuation of the fulfillment of this? So, just like we see in Joshua 10, Joshua is to go out and eradicate the people, and it's a prophetic fulfillment. It's a prophetic foreshadow of Armageddon, and Joshua goes out and does it, and he prays to God to keep the suns in the sky so that he can continue on. And God does that, and then God says, Joshua, I'm going to help you because you're not doing it all on your own. I'm going to send down hail and fire from heaven that are going to completely vanquish the rest of the enemies. So, in other words, there's Joshua was performing part of this, like Israel performing 65% of that. What happens if there's an earthquake, which we've seen that there have been earthquakes in that area continuing? What happens if there's another earthquake that just, you know, finishes things? Now the thing is that off the back of this, remember that even with Jeremiah 49, Iran has to be left to a degree to step into Ezekiel 38. Because if Iran is completely eradicated, then Ezekiel 38, what do you do with that? How are they in that? You would have to put Ezekiel 38 much further down the line for a nation to be rebuilt. It's not like it's Israel that can be rebuilt in a day, because that's only ever happened once in known history. So, yeah, earthquake and nukes do not mix. You're right. It would also fulfill that latter part in which they go to every country, like they're dispersed to every country. There won't be a country they don't go to. Um, I think one more question from Jay. I can't see it. Is it on? It'll be quick because I am really, really boiling here. Right. What will happen to bring down walls and security measures for Israel to think there is peace and safety? I think we're kind of really on the precipice of that. I think the battering that Iran has taken stops them facilitating the proxies. I think if Israel turns its attention back to the proxies now, and they're facilitating that. If Hamas can't rebuild because Iran is rebuilding, if Hezbollah can't, get armament because Iran is rebuilding, I think that can facilitate peace and security. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be hated. It doesn't mean that they're going to be, because that doesn't equate with scripture. As we see from Zechariah 12 to Zechariah 14, there's a progression that happens, and not once in that progression does Israel become liked by the surrounding nations or liked by the rest of the world. What we see is a progression from the surrounding nations hating Israel right through to the rest of the world hating Israel. So I think that whatever is going to happen, it's going to put off the rest of the world. And I think that means a continuation probably with the Gaza assault, a continuation with dealing with the northern territories in terms of Lebanon. And I think it also means that kind of the situation is set up for it. With Iran having to deal with Iran, with possible revolution gaining traction, for the IRGC to stay in power and to continue on, they've got an awful lot to deal with. So I think that's going to facilitate the IRG's distraction, is going to facilitate that peace and safety and walls down, Ezekiel 38 verse 11 moment. We live in amazing times. We live in fantastic times. It is absolutely an amazing time to be alive. Um, just so you know, we got, like I said, Bubba's on tomorrow. Um, I will be away for 10 days in Italy. We will be having a bit of a family break, but we'll also be filming for the documentary on spiritual warfare. So I will be away. So in that sense, I'll have a couple of videos set up for you, but I won't be live for a little bit, for about 10 days. But then we'll be back, we'll be live, and then summer is packed. We'll have guests on the show, I'll be on other shows. I'm on Tom Hughes' show on the 14th. I'm in Iceland on the 15th. Um, I'll be coming across to America in October. So there'll be a lot going on, but I do need, haven't had a holiday in quite some time, so I do need a bit of family time. So hopefully you understand that. But there will be videos up. I've been doing some Bible study videos for you, so they will be up as well. Obviously, they will probably not be current news breaking, what's happening in the world, because I'm not foretelling that. So it will be breaking down the Bible and going through line by line and precept by precept, but hopefully you get something from that. Guys, God bless. I call you the head and not the tail, above and not beneath, kings, queens, and priests in Jesus' mighty name. Remember, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. And guys, stick around for tomorrow. Uh, I'll send you the link, by the way, Bubba. I forgot I haven't sent you the link. I'm trying to get videos done. I'll send you the link, and we're on tomorrow with Bubba, probably about the same time as today. So, guys, God bless, and I will see you all tomorrow